Namaste everyone. I'm Abhay Kumar from Friends of India Society International, along with Punitji from Hindu Forum of Britain. And today I'm here with another chapter of Dharma Speaks. So before we start the talk and introduce our very special guest, let's start the session with a mantra to Lord Krishna, God of compassion, tenderness, and love. ॐ देवकी नंदाय विद्महे वासुदेवाय धीमहि तन्नो कृष्णः प्रचोदयात्. Let us meditate on Sri Krishna, beloved son of Devaki and Vasudev. May that Lord Krishna of dark complexion, who steals the heart, inspire and illumine our mind and understanding. So today is our fourth talk of the current series, and today's topic is based on the Bhagavad-Gita. Meditation, the key to recovering your authentic self. And I think it is very relevant and helpful in the current time of crisis. This is kind of third month of lockdown is going on, and mood swing, frustration, aggression, stress, these are very common symptoms these days. It's more challenging psychologically than physically, isn't it? Even according to Gandhiji also, the hardest punishment is to put someone in isolation. And we are in isolation for more than 2 months now. So we are suffering. So in today's talk, we will try to find out the solution to find these symptoms with our very special guest, Dr. Ramesh Pattni, DPhil Oxford, OBE. He is a psychologist and a Hindu theologian whose research is in the intersection of these traditions. He has deep interest in presenting the psychological concepts, tools, and techniques of the ancient traditions in today's world for mental well-being. He obtained a doctorate from the University of Oxford, Faculty of Theology and Religion. He also has 3 master's degrees in psychology, psychology of religion, and study of religion. After successfully running a family business in Kenya for 23 years, he decided to go back to his passion of learning and teaching. He completed his Oxford doctorate in 2015 and now studying for another doctorate in existential counseling and psychotherapy at NSPC in London. He has extensively lectured and conducted workshops and retreats on diverse subjects over the past 2 decades in yoga and non-dual traditions. He holds or has held many public positions, including Vice President of Chinmayan Mission UK, Vice President of Hindu Forum of Britain, and co-chair of the Hindu Christian Forum, trustee of Interfaith Network, and continues to serve the wider community in the UK. And very recently, for his voluntary work in interfaith relations and community services in the UK, he was bestowed an OBE in the New Year's Honours 2020 by Her Majesty the Queen. So please welcome Dr. Ramesh Pattni.
Namaste. Thank you very much, Abhayji, for the generous introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me here. And I'm sure that we'll have a good discussion about the Bhagavad Gita and what it means to us in these very challenging times.
No, indeed, it is our pleasure to have you here, Dr. Pattni. So as you said, today's topic starts with the Bhagavad-Gita. I have read it by myself, but I would like you to please introduce the Bhagavad-Gita to us and tell us how it is relevant to the world and the current situation.
Thank you. So let me kind of start with the second part of the question, which is really what being a human means. So when we think about the human condition and human being and human living, people have pondered about this condition of being human for millennia. So 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, all the philosophers, religious leaders, they've been thinking about some very fundamental questions about life. What is life? What is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? Who am I? Finding myself on this planet in this huge universe. And the question is, why am I here? What am I doing here? And what am I supposed to do? Even more important question. Because having found myself in this condition, in this human form, I am compelled to do some actions in the world. Just like Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad-Gita, everybody is impelled to do action in their lives. There is no way you can stop action. Therefore, what am I supposed to do? So these fundamental questions have been asked for such a long time, and people have been pondering over them, finding answers to them. And according to our tradition, we have got this wonderful text called the Bhagavad-Gita, the Holy Gita, and it is something of a very profound text. So much depth in its meaning and so much width in terms of its philosophy that it encompasses all the questions we've been asking about, which I just mentioned, about what is life, what is this universe, who am I? Fundamental question, it answers in such a deep and coherent manner that it is relevant today as it was 10,000 years ago. Why? Because it deals with the fundamentals of the human life and the human condition and the human identity. So when we talk about human life, human condition, what does it mean? Okay. So our scriptures say that there are 5 lessons to learn in life. And if you learn those lessons and you respond to those lessons in the right way, then this suffering which we are going through now, which is really intense, because if you think about what is this COVID virus brought to us and what has it done to our life globally, it has brought uncertainty about life in a very intense way, number one. Number two, it has brought the reality of death right at our doorstep. And number three, it has brought this huge suffering in our lives. So just like you mentioned that Mahatma Gandhi said, the biggest the trouble one can have is to have this isolation, and that suffering which comes from isolation is really some of our people experiencing that in an intense way. So imagine these 3 things: suffering, the reality of death, and this uncertainty about what is going to happen to me tomorrow, about my job, about my future, about the immediate things which I have to deal with. How am I going to deal with all these things, right? So we have been thrown into a deep end, and these are the 5 lessons which our scriptures tell us again and again in all our different scriptures, whether we talk about Ramayana, Mahabharata, whether we're looking at the Upanishads or Vedas. The first lesson he says, remember there is always going to be suffering in human life, which we all know about, right? Even now we are experiencing this suffering. Yeah. Number 2, remember that everything is transient, that everything keeps on changing. 3 months ago, our life was just normal. 4 months ago, 5 months ago, it was absolutely, things are going on. Nobody knew this, virus is coming. All of a sudden, complete change in our life situation, in our lives, in our own kind of families and our relatives and people are kind of experiencing this deep sorrow because somebody else has passed away. So everything is transient. That number two. Number three, life is going to cause dependency. Every kind of dependency is there. You depend on this, you depend on that, and that dependency is even intensified now. Imagine what was the first thing which people started running after the lockdown was announced. People became frantic. I want to have food in my house, hoarding food. People started looking for toilet paper. People started looking for all these other things which said, oh, I can't do without this. I can't do without this in my life. I must go and get it before the shops close.
Correct.
Dependency. That's number three. Number four, this body and this mind are subject to so much of draining of energy all the time. And we can imagine that even in lockdown, at the end of the day, we get exhausted. You know, in this isolation, that is one of the things that, you know, we are not doing anything, but we are so exhausted because there's so much pressure on the mind. Okay, so it causes dependency and it drains our body and our mind. And lastly, number five, is that dissatisfaction is going to come in our life whether we like it or not. So these 5 lessons are the human reality. The things which we have been asking about, who am I, what is my life, what is this universe, how am I finding myself here and what am I supposed to do? This is what our Bhagavad-Gita actually gives us. It gives us the answer to these fundamental questions of life. And therefore, it becomes such a wonderful text for all of us to kind of study and look at and see how it can help us in our own lives, because definitely it must help us because it is dealing with our fundamental ways of looking at things and experiencing these things in our life so that we can begin to see that there is a solution to our suffering. There is a solution to this uncertainty. There is a solution to experiencing change in our life. And we know this Bhagavad-Gita is one of the most well-known scriptures of the Hindu traditions. Everybody knows about it. There are great thinkers in this world who have taken up this book. Mahatma Gandhi, like you mentioned, Albert Einstein, Albert Schweitzer. You know, these are people who have contemplated on them. They've deliberated on the message. They've come up with a good understanding of what it is all about. And not only that, they've applied it in their own life. Because the Bhagavad Gita is not just a philosophical text. It is a practical scripture, and sometimes it is also known as the manual of life and living. And as we know that Bhagavad Gita is actually located in the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata, we can see that there are, you know, these 700 verses and 18 chapters in the Bhishma Parvan of the Mahabharata. And it is taken as an independent text in itself. Why? Because it is a text which teaches us how to live our life and what to do with our life. And therefore, it can be taken as an independent text so that you can read it, deliberate on it, and think about how it can apply to your life and put it into practice. So it is a practical manual of life and living. It gives us a very kind of coherent philosophy of life and the practice and how these practice are related to the action in the world, making choices in the world, and how to bring up our emotional part into the devotional kind of way of relating to the world and to the higher reality, and also knowledge. So it deals with all aspects of our life, the physical aspect, the emotional aspect, the intellectual aspect, and Lord Krishna synthesizes all these things into this wonderful text. He takes up various different philosophical systems, the Sankhya, the Yoga, the Vedanta, and social systems, the religious systems, and all major practices, and he synthesizes them in such a way that it becomes a very wonderful text which can help us in all aspects of life. You know, it's not just about the lockdown at the moment, because if we had been reading and studying the Bhagavad Gita, this lockdown would have had minimum effect on our lives, because we know what the thinking is behind it. We know that suffering is going to come. We have prepared ourselves for all these kind of changes. We know that we have to take care of ourselves, our physical self, our mental self, our devotional self. And Bhagavad gives us all these things which we require to do.
No, that's very, very true. It's not literal meaning. We cannot take the literal meaning directly from the Bhagavad-Gita, but definitely we can relate. I guess there is always a Kurukshetra battle going on within us or happening within us. Um, and in this current situation, it is even more frequent. So you talked about the that it is mentioned that this is suffering is going to happen. Is there any solution described in the Bhagavad Gita which we can follow or perform those actions to overcome these situations?
That's right. So there is a coherent kind of pathway which Lord Krishna gives to Arjuna. Arjun is in the middle of the battlefield. If you remember the Bhagavad Gita, the scenario is this, that
Yeah.
the Kauravas and the Pandavas have come on the battlefield. They are fighting for the kingdom. There are 5 Pandavas and Lord Krishna is with them. And the Kauravas are the people in the opposition. Of course, they are cousins, and the cousins are fighting amongst themselves for this kingdom. So Arjun tells Lord Krishna that take me to the middle of the battlefield and let me see what is going on. And he, being one of the greatest warriors of his time, finds himself in a crisis, right? He finds himself in a crisis, and actually this represents the human condition. Like you were saying, that there is inner conflict, which can be taken as this battle of the Mahabharata happening within us, but there is also outer conflict.
Yeah.
And this is what we find even in our day-to-day lives. We are constantly having this inner conflict between one idea, one thing, one choice, another choice, and conflict with other people and situations and things which we constantly encounter in our lives. And Arjuna is finding himself in this kind of condition. He's also finding that his subjective identity is separated from the rest of the world, and he was looking for connection. And when he sees his kith and kin across the battlefield, he begins to have this tremendous amount of grief. And he finds that this grief is overtaking him so that he becomes dysfunctional, that he is unable to say and stand up and fight, right? And being the greatest warrior, imagine that he is not able to function in the middle of the battlefield. So there is a crisis going on. Just like we are experiencing this crisis, Arjun in the middle of the battlefield was experiencing this crisis of existence, crisis of identity, crisis of meaning, crisis of choice and action. Therefore, the solution to which is given by Bhagwan Krishna is really about Arjuna's condition, which is our condition. Because in a sense, Arjun represents you and me. He is a human disciple. And Bhagwan Krishna is the divine teacher. So the human disciple is in this condition, and the divine teacher is giving them this teaching. So there is a flow in this structure of the Bhagavad Gita, which can then tell us exactly how to proceed, where to start, and there is a flow of thought which develops as we go from chapter to chapter, from verse to verse, from chapter number 2 right up to chapter number 18. It is given us this practical philosophy of what to do and how to live in our life. So if we can imagine that Arjuna is going through this crisis of emotion, he's feeling grief, he's feeling guilty, he has this anxiety which he's experiencing, he is having this idea, what am I supposed to do? Tell me what to do. So he surrenders to Lord Krishna and tells him, look, tell me what to do, because I have run out of all my kind of thinking and I don't know what to do. And behind that question is also the question is that who am I? So the advice Lord Krishna gives him takes him to a completely different frame of thinking. Now this is the divine teacher. It is a most brilliant kind of way in which he kind of takes the state of Arjuna as a dysfunctional human being and immediately lifts him up into a different frame of thinking. This is called reframing. So imagine that Arjuna is looking at the kith and kin from one lens. Lord Krishna is telling him, don't look at life from this lens. Look at your life from another lens. He says, do not grieve because you are not this physical entity who you think you are. You are the eternal Atman. You are the eternal Brahman. And in order to go beyond all suffering, forget about this suffering you are experiencing now, but to go beyond all this suffering, there is a way. There is a way to liberate yourself from the transactional world of suffering, but also to release yourself from samsara, the cycle of birth and death, by following this philosophy, by following these ideas which are there and practicing the techniques which are given, which I'm going to give you. And the starting point for that is, of course, Karma Yoga. So Lord Krishna in chapter number 2 talks about Karma Yoga, he talks about Jnana Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, and thirdly, he talks about the outcome of taking the knowledge, putting it into practice in Karma Yoga, and then the outcome which is called Sthita Prajna Lakshana, which means being established in the knowledge in such a way through practice that you become a man of wisdom, a man of perfection, who can live through anything, who can connect with life in such a positive way that there is only the experience of peace and happiness. So Karma Yoga is a starting point. And of course, Karma Yoga also involves Bhakti Yoga, because Karma Yoga in essence is two principles, Ishwar Arpan Buddhi and Prasad Buddhi. So when we talk about Karma Yoga, think of these two things. I'm dedicating all my actions to the Lord. I'm no longer interested in what I have to do for myself, but I'm doing this for the Lord. And whatever I get in return as a consequence of that action, I will take that as prasad from the Lord. So there is surrender, there is acceptance, and there is a right way of thinking, and there is a right way of acting in the world.
Right.
Dedicate all your actions to me, detach from the fruit of the action, and detach from action through knowledge. So he combines action and knowledge, and this knowledge is about what? The knowledge about Brahman, knowledge about Atman, knowledge about divinity in all its form. Whether it is Sagun Brahman, which means Brahman with name and form, or Nirguna Brahman. How to relate to both these things through Karma Yoga, through knowledge, then one begins to move ahead in one's spiritual life. Now, this whole process is the first stage of our spiritual journey, whereby through practice of Karma Yoga combined with Bhakti Yoga, and then looking at this actions, whatever we do, through the lens of knowledge, then we begin to reformulate our beliefs, to change our attitudes, and to redirect our intentions. These three fundamental things begin to change in our life. And this is called the process of purification, sattvification. This is the inner purification called chitta shuddhi, whereby the me and the mind begins to diminish, so that we begin to experience an inner peace in our life, which we have never experienced before. Why? Because we are following this philosophy by practicing Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga in such a way that it begins to have this fundamental effect in our mind, in our subliminal mind as well, so that the belief changes, everything changes. Attitude changes, everything changes. Intention changes, action in the world changes as well. So this is a kind of very general outline of the whole kind of pathway. So the first stage is Chitta Shuddhi. Then the second stage of our spiritual journey, according to the Bhagavad-Gita, is through quiescence, we get into the state of inner absorption through meditation. First stage, we prepare the mind by acting in the world through Karma Yoga, doing our dharma. So basically, Karma Yoga means that we do our dharma in the right way, with the right intention and the right attitude, dedicating all our actions to the Lord. That brings about the quiescence in the mind. And when the mind has become quiet, it becomes a fit instrument for very deep meditation. So when we do meditate, we discover that altered state of consciousness. The consciousness which is the divine consciousness. This is the rediscovery of our true nature, our authentic self, our true self, which is Atman, which is also Brahman. So first stage, Chitta Shuddhi, second stage, Dhyana, and through Dhyana we discover our true selves. And when we elevate ourselves and establish ourselves in that knowledge, then we have answered the fundamental question of life. Who am I? I am Brahman. What is the purpose of my life? To live as Brahman and to function in my life through Dharma, which then becomes my life in this transactional world.
So that's very important, the Chitta Suddhi. Even the Patanjali Yoga, Patanjali's definition of yoga is yoga chitti vritti nirodha. But mind is just chit, or mind is very strong. It's very hard to control. You talked about different kind of yoga as like karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. Generally, the common concept about yoga is limited only to different physical postures. How do you relate, or how do you connect these forms of yoga to the modern form of yoga? What is the overall structure?
Okay, so when we ask anybody what do you understand by yoga, so their understanding of yogi is what they find in society or community now, and this is just what we call the hatha yoga or Patanjali's yoga, where we do some asana, we do some
Correct.
pranayama, some breathing exercises, maybe sit down quietly for a little while, and that is the general concept of yoga, which is the widely kind of understood way of thinking about yoga. Now, when we talk about yoga, the word yoga itself is derived from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means union. So there is a fundamental concept in yoga called union. So the union is about what? The union is I am uniting with my true self, that I'm merging myself, which is this individual entity, into the divine reality called Brahma. And we can, if we think of yoga in this kind of general way, then there are many different pathways which will connect us to the higher. So karma yoga through action, that through action, I connect with divinity. Why? Because all the time I'm thinking, I'm dedicating this action to my Lord. And when I do that, when I say I'm dedicating, consecrating my actions to Bhagwan, then I'm connecting to my higher self. I'm connecting to the higher reality through devotion. Puja, if we sit down and do puja, what are we doing? We are connecting with divinity through ritual action. So that is Bhakti Yoga. And then in Bhakti Yoga also we can do mantra chanting. See, mantra chanting, if we get so deeply absorbed in our mind through mantra chanting, then we are also connecting with the divine. And then on the path of knowledge, we talk about Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasana. So Shravanam is listening to the knowledge, Mananam is reflecting on the knowledge, and Nididhyasanam is deep absorption in this knowledge. So you can see there are many pathways. So, people have invented many different yogas according to the modern idea, but really those are not yoga as we understand it in the traditional way. They have completely distorted, because when we talk about yoga in the modern sense, we are talking about so many different kinds of yoga which never existed before, which have no sense at all or no connection.
Correct. I totally agree with you. But main point is union or addition,
Yeah,
union to our body to mind, or union to our self-consciousness to the universal consciousness, or Atma to the Paramatma.
right.
Yeah, there are different kinds of yoga these days: chair yoga, beer yoga, even I heard horse yoga.
Yes.
I don't know what they do in horse yoga, but if they are fulfilling the purpose, if they are getting the results, or getting the purpose, I believe it's a freedom. you are a free person. You can name it whatever name you want. The other in the You talked about the meditation, or how we are controlling, or how we can control the mind, the dhyana. It's a very fine line difference, I believe, between concentration and meditation, or dharma or dhyan.
Mm, mm.
Generally, we do concentration, we are thinking that we are doing meditation. Um, so, what's the difference between concentration and meditation?
Okay, so maybe I can, talk about chapter number 6 in the Bhagavad Gita. It's called Dhyana Yoga, the chapter on meditation. And, we mentioned about the Yoga Sutra. And, if we analyze what is being said in the chapter, we can find parallels between Yoga Sutra and the Bhagavad Gita. So I was telling you that, Lord Krishna has synthesized so many of these traditions into just one package, which is such a beautiful thing he has done, so that you can have, all the tradition coming together philosophically and practically. So in Dhyana Yoga, chapter number 6, we have the Ashtanga Yoga, which is mentioned there in the different verses. Now, in that, there is a kind of systematic development of the idea of meditation. So, when we talk about concentration, we are talking about what Patanjali calls in the Yoga Sutra as dharana. Dharana is just a tool of the mind, which is focusing on something over a long period of time without a break, with full concentration and full attention. So imagine the mind has got this capacity to put its attention on something. Now, in this case, concentration means I am going to put my attention on something, whether it is something external, like people concentrate on a lamp, right? On a diya. So when I look at the diya and I focus my attention on it, my eyes are directed towards it, my mind begins to flow in that direction as well. My mind becomes concentrated. Concentration is not meditation according to what Bhagwan talks about. Okay, we have to go to the next step. The next step, again, taking the framework of the Yoga Sutra, from dharana, he proceeds to dhyana. Now, dhyana is contemplation. So from concentration, we go to contemplation. Contemplation is a deep reflection on the ideas of the scriptures. So when I contemplate on the Atman, when I contemplate on Brahman, I'm thinking at the intellectual level of these ideas which become extremely clear. And this contemplation is compared to, if you remember that when we kind of pour oil out of a bottle, and the dhara which is there is so fine, it is so flowing so well that you don't even feel it is flowing. It is such a continuous kind of, dhara. Now, in this way, the mind begins to function. It just flows with an idea without any break and deeply contemplating on it. This is called dhyana. And then finally, the true meditation is samadhi. Samadhi is this deep absorption in the sense of I-ness and going beyond the sense of I-ness into pure consciousness. So this is a deep state of mind getting absorbed in just the awareness and consciousness. When the mind gets totally absorbed in it, the mind itself disappears. The identification with the body-mind intellect disappears. The sense of individuality disappears, and we find ourselves in a completely different state of consciousness, which is called Sat Chitananand, the state of Brahman. This is what Lord Krishna describes to us in chapter 2. This is the Brahmic sthiti, which means the state of Brahman. And, it's not that Lord Krishna is talking about. Many of our sages and masters have actually shown that it can be done. And they are living masters who actually we know that they are in this high state of consciousness. They are like divine people walking amongst us and showing us the way as well.
No, that's true. Even yogis are there. Recently, I watched a video, a yogi without any proper clothing. He was doing meditation at minus 20 degrees Celsius on Himalayas. So yogis are still there.
Yeah.
And in the meditation, is there any disadvantage in doing meditation? What are the precautions we should take while doing the meditation, and when and how to do the meditation?
So yeah,
Is there any transition period when we move from concentration to meditation, or
yes.
it's just automatically happens? Then you don't even realize that from concentration you move to meditation.
No, I think, in order to get to the state of samadhi, we have to kind of proceed step by step. In the beginning, we have to, go step by step because, we are not yet used to lifting the mind immediately into that kind of state of consciousness. So therefore, remember that Patanjali talks about, the Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of the yoga. So that means yama niyam means what? It means I have to prepare my outer life. Then I have to prepare myself in terms of asana. So yes, in order to kind of understand, meditation, we have to think about the mind. The mind is not capable of completely jumping into a deep state of meditation or samadhi. And therefore, you remember I was talking about the preparation of the mind. So first of all, that can be a very long process whereby you have to live your life in a certain way, in a very sattvic way, in a dharmic way, in a way in which it is kind of following the precepts of the Bhagavad-Gita. And when you follow that, your mind becomes quiet. It becomes, in fact, the sattvic mind has got 3 properties. It becomes much more experiencing santosh, shanti, and samadha. This is what I call the 3 S's of sattvification of the mind. So if you want to know whether you're making spiritual progress, think about, am I feeling more and more santosh in my life, contentment in my life? Am I feeling more and more shanti, inner peace in my mind? Am I feeling more samadhan, equanimity in my mind, resilience in my mind? So that's a good way of knowing whether you are now getting ready to do deep absorption into the nature of the self. So remember that even Patanjali has got this Ashtanga Yoga, and they are not kind of put together in a random way. It is a systematic development of our transactional life through yam and niyam, and our bodily posture, asana, our breathing kind of way in which we circulate the prana in our body, and pratyahar, which means that I have to bring all my senses inwards. So this is a systematic way of going more and more inwards, right? And therefore, dharana becomes the starting point in our deep meditation. Now if you cannot concentrate, how are you going to meditate? If you can't concentrate, how are you going to contemplate? So without concentration, you are not going to be able to meditate in any case. So therefore, just like we go to, nursery school, then we go to primary school, then we go to, secondary school, then we go to university. You can't just jump into saying, okay, I want to go for my degree, because you don't have the qualification. So qualification means that I have to be able to concentrate. Then I have to be able to contemplate in such a way without a break, without any kind of, confusion or anything else. The deep clarity which comes to contemplation is very important. And then once that is received, then I am now available. My mind is available for the deepest meditation. Okay? So it is a systematic process. We have to go through this whether we like it or not, because the result can only come when the fruit has to go through its ripening process before it can be enjoyed as a sweet mango, right? We are all thinking about mangoes at this time. So it is like the ripening of the mind, preparation of the mind, then I can go into deep samadhi. As far as, is there any danger in meditation? The only danger I can think of is really that don't try to, do things on your own and imagine some practices which have no kind of basis in our scriptures. Make sure that you follow the instructions which are given in the Bhagavad-Gita or whatever scripture you are using. If possible, do it under the guidance of a teacher. I would strongly advise that do it under the guidance of the teacher, because then there is somebody who has already made the journey who will be able to guide you. And as far as obstacles to meditation are concerned, Lord Krishna says, do everything in moderation. Don't eat too little, because you can't sit down and meditate. If you are thinking about food all the time, and if I sit down without any food in my stomach, where will my mind go? Oh, what's for lunch? What's for dinner? What can I eat next, right? So moderation in eating, moderation in all our aspects of our life. And with that kind of moderation, then we are able to take our mind to the highest level of consciousness. The troubles which we will experience normally comes from the gunas. So as you know that there are three gunas. So the three gunas are the rajasic, the tamasic, and the sattvic. So when I sit down to meditate, for example, if the rajasic energy is very much, then what will happen? The mind will go here and there and everywhere. I can't concentrate, I can't contemplate, and of course, meditation is out of the window. So that's why we say that you have to choose a time when the sattvic guna is the uppermost in our mind and the body. So between 4 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning is the perfect time, because that is the sattvic phase stage of our day. Okay, this means that the mind will be available much more readily during those times. So 4 to 8 in the morning, 4 to 8 in the evening. This is taking advantage of the natural rhythms of the body and the universe around us. So that is how we can begin to take away the obstacles, prepare the mind, and then be able to meditate in that.
Right. So that's very important to go step by step. Even as you mentioned in the Patanjali Stanga Yoga or Patanjali Sutra, there are steps. I consider it in two different phases. The first phase is Yama, Niyama, Asana, and Pranayama. When you control that, move to the second phase, which is more on controlling mind, the Pratyahara, controlling your senses, so that if you won't able to control your senses, you won't able to control your mind. Then move to Dharana, then Dhyan, and of course then Samadhi. So have to go step by step. It's really true, and you should perform under guidance of any teacher. That's also very important. We have time constraint. Otherwise, I would love to go more deep into this session and in this talk. But my last question is, you used a term called Sthita Pragya. What's the concept of Sthita Pragya? And could you please tell us about it?
Okay. So towards the end of at the end of chapter number 2, Arjuna asked Lord Krishna a question. He says, okay, now you talked about knowledge, you talked about karma yoga, you talked about how those can be brought together so that the person it gets enlightened. So this person of perfection is the person who is rooted or established in this profound knowledge of the self. So sthita means established. Prajna means the highest wisdom, the highest knowledge. So somebody who is established in the highest knowledge by following the precept and the practice of Bhagavad-Gita is the one who is called the Sthita Prajna. And the Lakshan, which are the attributes of this person, are given in the end section of chapter number 2, which is called Sthita Prajna Lakshana. In this one, Lord Krishna says, what will happen to you once you are actually in that enlightened state? He says this person of wisdom attains this state of Brahman, whereby he gets established in this Satchidanand in such a way that nothing can disturb him. And he gives us the example of the flow of the river in this huge ocean. Now, if the river actually flows in this ocean, nothing is going to happen. Why? Because it is such a huge body of water that even if the rivers are going 6 at a time, nothing happens. But suppose I have a little small cup in which I am having some water, and I drop something, a drop of water, what is going to happen? It's going to get splash and disturb the water in that small cup which I have. Now imagine that this person of wisdom is like this huge ocean, nothing can disturb him. He is living in the state of complete peace. And Lord Krishna says, where there is peace, there is happiness. Okay, so he says that when you practice all these things, there is no longing for anything, there is no desire for anything. The body, mind, intellect becomes so pure that only divinity can flow through it. It is like now your instrument, which is so pure, will be taken over by divinity itself. And we have seen these masters, they're so shining, brilliant people who are able to give us this knowledge in such a clear, concise manner. Why? Because they are not there. The ego is not there. The ahankar is not there. It has all kind of been removed. This is the person of wisdom. This is the one who is established in that knowledge to such an extent that nothing can move him. He's living in that kind of peaceful state, in a state of complete happiness, and he's only there for one purpose. And that purpose is to serve humanity. And Lord Krishna gives the example of Raja Janak. He was this person of wisdom. He was already established and enlightened. But what was he doing? He was serving his kingdom. So this is a very good example for us to kind of contemplate on and think about as to how we can move towards becoming that person of wisdom.
Right. No, it was unfortunately, as I mentioned, we have time constraint and we cannot continue this journey just so we have to, unfortunately, I have to stop this. But thank you so much, Dr. Pattni. It was very insightful session, and thanks for sharing your experience, your research and knowledge with us. And I hope that we can have such sessions regularly.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And it has been a great pleasure to always talk about Bhagavad Gita. It just kind of fills my heart with so much pleasure and so much, reverence for the Gita itself, and tremendous devotion to Bhagwan Krishna. And knowing that, this gift he has given to us is such a tremendous gift.
No, indeed, this is the beauty of Sanatana Dharma, that we don't have a single scripture. The scriptures are getting modified by Kala Yuga. So we cannot, the most recent one is the Mahabharata or the Bhagavad-Gita we can refer to. It's kind of, if we are studying in 10th standard, we cannot read the book or we cannot refer the book of 4th standard. Of course, this is a journey from 4th standard to 6th to 10th. But that's very relevant in this current situation. The most recent scripture is Bhagavad-Gita, and that's the beauty of Sanatana Dharma, that we don't have a single one to refer. It's getting modified in each yuga, in each kala. So no, thanks again. Now I'd like to invite Punitji to propose the vote of thanks. Punitji.
Namaste, Dr. Ramesh Pattni. Namaste, Abhayji. On behalf of Hindu Forum of Britain and from FISI and KPCS, we thank you, Dr. Ramesh Pattni, for a wonderful talk on Bhagavad Gita and meditation. You have explained us the true meaning of yoga and meditation. So this crisis time is the right time for us to look inward If we can't go outside, we can go inside. So meditation is one of the greatest tool to look inside, and once you've conquered your mind, you can do anything. And we hope that our viewers will have a lot to take in from this talk and to contemplate. Thank you so much, and thank you, Abhay Ji, for hosting this wonderful talk. We look forward to see all of you next Sunday again for our fourth episode of Dharma Speaks. Thank you again. Thank you both of you. Namaste.